My guest today is like the Ryan Nugent Hopkins of Canadian rock and roll and country music, for that matter. He hasn't aged a bit since his solo debut album in 1999, and he's one of those guys. He's one of the nicest guys in the music industry today. He'd give you the shirt off his back if he was wearing one. It's Clayton Bellamy has agreed to be my guest today.
Reluctantly.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the Clayton Bellamy Foundation for the Arts, which supports education and community-based programs in the province of Alberta by providing financial support to arts programs in need and by advocating the benefits and importance of arts education.
Reluctantly.
You're too kind, my friend. How are you?
It's great to see you, man. I know it hasn't been a long time since we've seen each other, but it's always a treat to hang out with you, to visit with you, talk on the phone and that sort of thing, because you're such a goddamn positive guy. Like, everything is coming up roses for you all the time. Even with the strife and troubles that we face on a day-to-day basis, you always have that smile on your face, man.
Well, thank you. You know, I really, it's not every day. I mean, you can ask my better half, but trying to keep an attitude of gratitude helps me get through the ups and downs of this crazy business. That's for sure.
There's so many places to go and so many places to start. I guess we'll start kind of in the same sort of vein when I was talking to Plume when he did the podcast, because there's the Bonnyville connection there with you and Plume. Plume moved from back east to Bonnyville. But did you grow up in Bonnyville, like right from the get-go, or were you a transplant to Bonnyville, Alberta as well?
No, I'm a fourth generation Bonnyville, Northern Alberta kid. I grew up here. My great grandfather came to this part of the world, smuggled between two mattresses in a horse-drawn wagon. He was wanted for hanging in the Dakotas for they figure maybe he shot someone or cattle robbing or something. It was a big family secret. It actually only came out like maybe 10 years ago before my grandfather passed. He's like, I've been carrying this secret around. I'm not supposed to talk about.
That is the most unbelievable story. So
yeah,
it was during the Wyatt Earp days, or like what?
Around that time. Yeah, they thought maybe he it's all rumor and conjecture at this point that maybe he was running with some of the gangs of Billy the Kid or those kind of folks. We don't know. We just know he was an ornery son of a bitch, and he shot my grandfather out of a tree one time with his pistol. I still have his rifle. I have his old hex barrel Winchester 30-30 in my closet, well, in my gun safe.
Okay, so you said this is fourth generation Bonnyvillian.
Yeah.
And Bonnyvillian, I suppose.
Yeah, Bonnyville.
Yeah. So you say fourth generation. So this was your great grandfather, or what was his name? I got to Google this. We got to look this up.
His name was John William Bellamy. Yeah, and that would be my great grandfather. And those are the stories I heard, and that were kind of passed down. And my grandfather didn't have a whole lot of memories of him, just that he, except for those ones, that he was just an ornery SOB, and he'd kind of chase him around. And for some reason too, though, he would always take him. If there was any kid that was going to go with him to go get the cattle or to go do an errand, he would always bring my grandfather. And they would go, he has memories of going out and, as like a 5-6-year-old kid, taking the horses and going out and rounding up the cattle. And
you've got the makings of a Yellowstone thing on Netflix, or
kind of. Yeah, I got that outlaw in my blood, that kind of rebel rousing kind of thing. It's come passed down in my family. So sometimes if I wonder where I get that from, I think of him.
It's no wonder you look so fucking good in a hat.
Maybe that's it.
Do you ride horses? Are you a horseback rider? Was there any farming business going on in your genes that you picked up on and continue to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Still ride, still my dad still farms, and my sister farms. I'm the only one that didn't get into farming, maybe much to my dad's disappointment sometimes, but we grew up riding and working cattle and grain. And my dad, he just retired from cows, but he still I still help them with the grain every fall, and planting and seeding and all of that stuff. But yeah, it's kind of a family business.
What's well, and I talk when I was out at your golf tournament this past summer, and met Barry Kalinsky.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah, he was the Reeve of Bonnyville County, and he was nice enough to purchase me in the auction for the golf, along with McSween there from McSween Fabricating. And I just messaged him the other day because part of the prize package, or part of the auction package, was a chance to see some of our classic Canadian rock groups playing at the Century Casino. So he was saying that he was busy doing harvest. So, and that's the kind of thing out in Bonnyville, and that's a small rural towns all over Alberta. Everybody in the entire community gets on it, and once they're done theirs, they help out others, and all that stuff too, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially back in the day, that's what everybody did. You all kind of did the work together. It was communal living. And to get the harvest done. That's if you didn't have your neighbors to help you, you most often didn't survive. So that's how it was worked. You went from one field to the other until they were all done, and then you had Thanksgiving.
So you've had your share of time behind the levers of a combine or a swather and stuff like that.
It's where I wrote my first songs, to be honest, was literally riding behind the wheel of a tractor, because especially before phones and before all of that bullshit, you had your own brain, and that was it. You sit and listen to the roll of the tractor going up and down the rows. And I thought it was a normal thing just to make up songs and sing them. And I would do that all day long.
Did you have a cab in any of the tractors or the combines or anything like that?
No, no. It was you put on a big hat to keep off the sun if you were lucky, or otherwise it was wet and cold.
And then, depending on what was on harvest, you had your oats and you had your wheat and you had your all the alfalfa and all this stuff, feed for cows and whatnot. But if you had to swath barley, the itchiest goddamn grain that there is.
The worst. And I'm allergic to like the alfalfa and stuff. So like doing hay, I would just break out in a body rash. It was like some kind of special torture. But man, you want to get tough, stooking bales all day. I remember, because they weigh like 50 pounds each, and you do that. I remember doing it as a kid, and it was, I wasn't heavy enough to push down the pedal to knock the stook back, because a stook is in, it's like 4, 5, 6, it's like 10 bales in a point like this, and you stack them all on this sled that the tractor would drag, and you'd go along, pick one up as you drive by it, throw it on this thing, and you'd make your stook, and then you'd press this lever that would tilt the whole sled, and the stook would just slide off the back, and then you'd keep going. And I remember being too little. I could pick up the bales, but wasn't heavy enough when I pushed on the pedal to make it tip to get them off. So that's when I got put up to driving the tractor, because I could hold it in a straight line.
I remember even sometimes when I was growing up in Creston, BC, we'd get calls. My buddy Rod Sommerfeld and I would get calls from some of the local farmers in Canyon and Lister and stuff. And we'd get offers to, go out and work for the afternoon or for the weekend throwing bales. And I would always say, is it hay or is it straw? Because there's a big difference between hay and straw.
Yeah, about 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've always treated doing music like farming, like going out every day, and I'm going to make fence. It's just, you're pounding posts every day, and just, and trying to move a little further down the field. And I think a lot of times that's what I attribute to some of my, success, is that it just treating it like that. Like every day you got to get out. And if you're not pounding posts, man, winter's coming. So that's the only way to keep busy and keep moving forward in it.
Farming brings out a work ethic in people that people who are not farmers you don't get. Right.
I'd agree. Yeah. Because there's nobody there who's holding your hand, and there's, at the end of the season, when the crops come in, it's exactly that. There's no safety net. There's just what you can get done before the snow flies. So, and that's, I guess, growing up with that, I've always applied that to making music and to doing that there was no safety net. I have to go out and I can't wait for opportunities. I can't wait for somebody to sign me. I just got to go out and make it happen on my own.
So you're driving tractor, you're helping out on the farm. You continue to do so, but at some point, and I'm guessing you're driving tractor, you're early mid-teens, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're driving tractor, you're, singing songs. You're probably listening to 790 CFCW if you got a transistor radio, or if you got, somehow radio in the out in the field.
Yeah, you know what? We were actually listening. If you were at my parents' grandparents' place, we were listening to 840, which was then 790 CFCW. But if you're at home, it was always tuned to 630 Ched, which at the time was the rock station in the area that we could pick up. And we were listening to. We had a lot of classic rock at home. My parents, loved rock and roll. My dad was an old hippie. Even though he wouldn't tell you now, you wouldn't know by looking at him with the cowboy hat. But he grew up loving Black Sabbath and loving Styx and lots of kind of that late 70s, early 80s rock and roll. I had all of those records at the Humble Pies and the Led Zeppelins at my fingertips, alongside of Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash and that kind of stuff. So I had that mashup of both those things going on at the same time in my household.
When did you get your first guitar? How old were you?
Maybe 13. I was 13 or 14, probably 13. And it didn't really lock in for me though, until I was about 15 or 16. I saved up and I bought my own guitar. This $100 I spent on a Yamaha parlor guitar, and it came with a book of a songbook, and it was just kind of Bob Dylan songs and
Proud Mary.
Yeah, If I Had a Hammer, songs like that. And I learned them. The chord was over the word, and I would sing it and play the chord, and eventually that kind of grew into, because again, nowadays it's so easy to learn guitar, really, because you can go on to YouTube and there's 1,000 guys that'll teach you how to play the chords and right where to put your fingers. But at the time, it was like some secret you had to unlock. And I took guitar lessons, but that was so slow. And even as I started playing in bands, when I turned 16, I started playing in a band. It was a bunch of older guys, they were all in their 30s. And they had a band called the Prairie Ramblers, and I was the singer, and I played acoustic and sang, and we went and played. We'd play, hall dances and weddings and powwows and you name it, anything that we could get at. And it was better than a part-time job, because I was making about the same, and I got to play music every night. Well, every weekend, anyway.
Right. So did you end up graduating from high school? Did you stick it out and then move on, or did you start to, with doing your weekend gigs with the Prairie
Prairie Ramblers? Yeah, barely. I graduated, but it was a close barely. But I ended up I went from there to Red Deer College and studied music for 2 years. I tried to get into the more prestigious Grant McEwen, but I failed the entrance exam 3 times. So I was like, well, maybe somebody else will let me in. We'll lower the bar a little bit. So Red Deer took my money, and I studied music and music business for 2 years there. And I don't think that I learned so much about, I mean, the music business turned so fast that from what I learned in business then doesn't really apply now, except some of the fundamentals of how to do good business. But, what I really learned was about life and just because I started college at 17. So I was quite young, but I got a band called the Moonshine Bandits out of college that we all through college. And right about 6 months after college, we were out touring and playing shows, playing in nightclubs 6 nights a week, 4 or 5 sometimes. That's how I barely graduated college too, because by our second year we were playing nightclubs so much that I was missing 2 or 3 days a week out of school because I was out doing what I was going to school for.
Mm-hmm. Do you still keep in touch with any of the guys in that band or any of your pals? It always, anytime I hear about somebody who's gone to college and the experience of the learning process, and the all of the pencils and books and theory and all that stuff. I always think about the relationships that are established there, and I think about Corb Lund and the Smalls, and like how that spawned from Grant MacEwan Community College. And then, we've seen what Corby has done all these years. Do you still keep in touch with the guys from the Red Deer College?
Yeah, none of them really ended up going on to do music professionally after the band kind of fizzled out that few months after college. They all kind of went about doing other things, but I do keep in touch with all of them still to this day. There's still good friends, and I see them when I'm in whatever town passing through on the road. I run into them, but and they've followed me along in my journey as well, which has been really cool. But I think out of anyone in my graduating class, I was the only one that kind of went on to continue to do it, and I just stubbornly refused to say uncle, I guess, to just stop going.
It's a really good point you bring up right there. You go to college, and then you're sticking it out. You're going to stick it out, and you want to do this. But I mean, you can't be a one-man band, right? I mean, sure, you can do your acoustic shows and that sort of thing, but if you're going to carry on with something, you got to have everybody who has got the same mindset, the same passion, the same drive, the same, I'm going to get there sort of mentality. And then when you run into guys who maybe you went through the same educational experience, or some maybe the same experience doing some gigs on the road, and then all of a sudden they kind of fade off and they're doing their job part-time and then music part-time, and then all of a sudden they're doing their job 75% and a little bit of music, and then all of a sudden they're just doing their job. You find you can't push rope. Like the guys that you figured, hey, we're gonna all get in this boat and we're gonna row together, and all of a sudden you're rowing by yourself. It's like, fuck, where did everybody go? And because they had to grow up at some point, but you never did. You stuck it out, right?
Yeah, and you're exactly that happened so many times along the way. But I could also, coming from that, there was an era, and I kind of feel like it's coming back. But there was an era in those late '90s, early 2000s when you played clubs, you cut your teeth playing in nightclubs, 6 nights a week, and we did that for 7 years. I did that straight. I just lived in a suitcase, and I rode from town to town in a cube van. I had my own sound system and lights, and we would unpack it and pack it every week in a different town all across America. We played as far south as Austin, Texas, far east as Superior, Wisconsin, and in the States, and all the way out to Toronto, and kind of back all the way to Vancouver, bouncing from town to town. And I could see the other bands that you would see, and you would meet guys and go, that he's got the same thing. I see what myself in him, or he's going to do something, and see these guys. Mike Plume was one of them, who was an early hero for me that I saw it was the guys who were writing and recording their own stuff that I went, I want to do that. Like this playing 6 nights a week is fun, but it's not sustainable. It's not something that I want to do. It's an ends to a means. And that's why I was always working towards, how can I keep playing music and not get a day job, but get out of this and start doing something original. And that was the key, was write songs. And I would see guys like him, or I remember Doc Walker was an early one too, that I met those guys and went, they're like, they've got their own album, they're all promoting it, they're playing their own original songs, and I knew that was the key early on.
And you had the luxury of having a cube van and your own stuff. A lot of times there's guys who want to be in a van and or be in a band, and the only reason the bass player is in the band is because he has a big car.
Right. Yeah. Well, I played in a bunch of shitty bands for a long time, and as the guy just riding along. And then I realized quickly that if I was going to move forward in this business, that I had to have the wheel. I had to be the control of my own destiny. And so my folks helped me out with a loan, and I bought a cube van and a PA system, and me and my dad built some bunks in it, so you could ride 3 across the front, and one guy always had to roll in the bunk. And we did that. We put 3 engines in that old cube van, and finally, after about 7 years of doing that, I called it quits and actually moved to Nashville. For my first time, I was about 24, 25 years old. I moved to Nashville and just decided I was going to live there and meet people and write songs and see if I could make it, further myself that way.
We'll be right back. The podcast you are listening to is brought to you by The Terry Evans Show with Pete Potipko on Edmonton's Classic Rock, K97. You can listen to it from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday at 97.3 on your FM dial in Edmonton. If you are outside of the Edmonton market, you can listen online at k97.ca and click Listen Live anytime from 5 till 9 a.m. Mountain Time, Monday through Friday. The Terry Evans Show with Pete Potipko on Edmonton's Classic Rock, K97. Okay, so you moved to Nashville. What I'm trying to figure out what year this is. Your first solo record came out in 99?
Yeah, 99. And that's when I met some of the core people that I still play with today. One of them ended up being a member of the Roadhammers, which is Corbett Fraz in the drums. And he and I connected shortly after that first record, and that was the first time I put that album out in 99, that I saw, hey, this could actually be something. I had a song on the radio called Running on Empty that actually won an Alberta Recording Industry Award for Country Recording of the Year that year.
Yep,
and I didn't even know what that was at the time. But I saw, okay, that this could actually be a thing. And that really got me hungry to record more. And in 2001, I put out the self-titled album. And that was kind of when I really we had a band that was a thing. We had a sound, and we were kind of doing something that was original and different. And that was myself and Corbett Fraz and Steve Farrell. And Troy Ranger at the time was playing guitar, and we were touring up until we did that, kind of playing a mix of original shows and cover band stuff, and creating a following in Alberta, especially regionally, until about I moved to, I think, Nashville in about 2004.
2004. I'm doing the math. 2099, 2001. You're with your buddies. You're doing the thing in Nashville in 2004, and then it's 2024 now. So we are coming up on the 20th anniversary of the Roadhammers, because it was 2005. So Jason McCoy, he was in a family band. Is that correct, or am I thinking of somebody else?
I think that maybe somebody else, but Jason started really young. He had his first record deal on, I think it was MCA, when he was like 17. This used to be our town. He still had braces, and he was just rocking his mullet, and that was his first big hit.
So was Jason, because Jason is Canadian, is he not?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So where do you meet Jason McCoy? I get so you moved to Nashville, 2004. Within a year and a half, you're a Roadhammer. Like, how does all of a sudden Clayton Bellamy go from Clayton Bellamy, Bonnyville tractor driving kid to I'm a Roadhammer?
Well, it was interesting. Well, it was crazy. I moved to Nashville in that year, pretty much a year and a half before the Roadhammers. I was up there. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I had a few friends in the Steve Earle camp that were helping me out. Ray Kennedy, Steve's producer, and Steve's brother, Patrick Earle, who was kind of quasi managing me and helping me out to meet people in Nashville. And I remember I was kind of getting to my wit's end being in Nashville, because I was not getting anywhere, and I had no money, and I was living in a room in a house. I was renting off this guy, and who had cats that absolutely hated me. Every time I left the door open, they would go in and like piss on my bed. It was horrible. Yeah. Anyway, that's a long story, but I don't want to sidetrack us, but yeah, I remember Patrick Earle calling me, and he had a gig. We were just talking on the one day, and he was telling me how they were looking for a guitar tech for Steve Earle, and somebody to play a little bit of keyboard, a little bit of rhythm guitar, and do Steve's guitar tech. And I was like, dude, you got to give me this gig. Like, I need this. This is going to be the thing for me. And he refused to give me the gig. He said, if I give you this gig, you'll never become an artist. He said, you'll never stop touring, because Steve never stops touring, and you'll never get to do what you want to do. And I don't want to see you do that. And I was so pissed off at him at the time. I was like, man, this was my big break, and you wouldn't give it to me. You're my bro. But I moved about 4 months after that conversation. I moved back to Canada, and I ended up getting the audition for the Roadhammers. And years later, I called him and thanked him for not giving me the gig with Steve, because if he had, he was absolutely right. I never would have gotten the audition call for the Roadhammers. But about, just to keep the timeline going, I moved back home. I met a girl, and we had a baby on the way. All that kind of stuff kind of started. My ex-wife and I had our first child on the way, and I was kind of figuring out what I was going to do outside of music, because that year or so in Nashville did not pan out. And now, having a baby on the way, I thought, I have got to get my shit together, because I can't pay for a kid on the menial money I was making, with music. So I was working a day job, and I got a call out of the blue from my old time manager, Jolene Modiak, who said, "Hey, Jason McCoy is trying to reach you. He wants to talk to you about this project he's working on, and maybe you auditioning." And I brushed it off a couple times, until my ex finally, she said, maybe you should go and hear what they have to say. So I went and met with Jason. We had some mutual friends and a drummer that wasn't in the band, but he was playing drums for Jason at the time. And he said, Clayton's your guy. You got to get audition Clayton for this gig. He was putting together this trucker band to do a one-off kind of record, just the ultimate road album. And it was just going to be a one-time thing. And so Jason called me. He had already auditioned like a dozen people, and nobody was kind of working out. So I went up and I met him and Chris Byrne, who is the other, long 20-year Roadhammer member, who was, he was playing bass with Jason's solo band at the time. And we shot the shit a little bit. And I remember he was playing, I was playing a gig in Calgary, and his band was playing like Nashville North at the, the big tent at Stampede. And they drove the tour bus downtown and parked out front of the club to come and see our final set after their show. And Jason and his wife and the band all came in, and I'm like shirtless and crawling along the tables, knocking glasses off, singing Roadhouse Blues and screaming into this microphone. And Jason's going, "That's our guy." And his wife's going, "No, do not hire this guy. He is not your guy." But he saw something in me, I guess. And he sent me these 4 songs to learn. And I had always kind of faked playing lead guitar. I played a decent rhythm, passable rhythm anyway. And he sent me this and wanted me to be kind of the second lead guitar player. And Jason's an extremely accomplished guitar player.
Yeah.
I think one of the most underrated players in Canada. And he sent me these songs, and I spent 2 weeks. I didn't come up for air, just learning. The original Eastbound and Down was on there. The original Girl in the Billboard. We had the Allman Brothers' Ramblin' Man. I remember those 3 for sure. And I rolled into this audition, and he didn't tell me that they were filming a TV show at the time. Joel Stewart who famously, a video producer who was working for CMT. He was filming this TV show following Jason making the original record and putting the band together. So they didn't tell me when I went to the audition that I was going to be on camera. So I rolled in. I was already nervous. I'd never been in an audition. And there's Joel Stewart, and I see him, and I'm like, oh, what are you doing here, man? He's like, well, we're going to film this for a TV show. Puts a mic on me, sticks a camera in my face. He goes, good luck, buddy. Let's see what you got. It's like, my butthole was airtight, man. I was just puckered right up. I was so nervous. I could barely play, but we went in there and we played these 3 or 4 songs, and Jason was smiling the whole time and bopping his head, and we sang and played together. And then he left the room with the camera guys, and they all left, and Scott and Chris are in there like good job, man. Like, this is the first one of these we've done where Jason's been smiling. So that's a good thing. And sure enough, he came back in like 10 minutes later and offered me the gig. And if you watch the TV show and, if you can still find it in real time, that happened in real time. They walked in with the cameras and stuff and said, hey man, if you want the gig, it's yours. And I said yes. And honestly, 6 months later, everything was a blur. 6 months later, we had our first #1 record. And by the time we crossed the country the first time, it had already gone gold and went on to be platinum.
And it was Roadhammer Mania really for a while there too, wasn't it?
It was, because it was the first time, at least in Canada, that someone had really captured the spirit of this TV show. Like, they timed it out perfectly that you were watching the show in real time as we were making the record. We were in Nashville, and keep in mind too, still, I didn't have a penny to my name. I was still sleeping on friends' couches when I was in Nashville and living off my girlfriend, who became my wife. And, at the time, like we had nothing really, but this kind of idea, and we knew that it was going to be something. And when you watch the final episode, the album was done and the first show was played. The next day, the record was in the stores. So, and there was no Facebook, there was no thing. So when that happened, people ran out and they bought that record, and it was crazy. We played our first couple of shows. Our first 2 shows were played in Bonnyville and in Cold Lake, in succession, 2 nights apart. And they were both sold out. And at that point, I'd never played a sold out show for anything. So I knew that this was something crazy. The crazy train was about to start rolling.
And what a great thing for you. I'm Cold Lake and Bonnyville. That's both of those basically in your backyard, like hometown shows.
It was unreal. Yeah, those were kind of the quiet proving grounds. Like, hey, can we do this? We're going to play these 2 shows. And yeah, they were there. I remember specifically in Bonnyville, walking out of the side door of the Agriplex, which was the kind of the hockey rink at the time, and people were lined up around the side of the building to get in. And I was like, what is happening here? Yeah, it was pretty wild.
Probably everybody Bonnyville's a small town, and you knew everybody.
I really did. Yeah, So,
hey, how you doing?
Exactly. I was like, hey, we'll see you in a minute. It was wild, and that year was pretty insane for me. I got married, I had a baby, and I had a #1 record all at the same time. But so my feet didn't really touch the ground. But I remember right after the band hired me, I was, I knew I was in over my head, because I was not a lead guitar player. I had faked my way into this thing. So I answered an ad on a music, in a music store, guitar player wanted. And I joined this country cover band and started playing in all these crappy, country bars and stuff up in Fort McMurray and the TNC in Calgary, like these pretty rough bars. But I was playing, all I did all night is play electric guitar, trying to get good before this band actually started doing shows, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember being at this country club in Calgary. I don't know if it doesn't exist anymore, called the Town and Country. And in between our sets, you play 4 sets a night, 4 45-minute sets. And in between one of the sets, they were playing music videos on the big screen that would drop down in front of the stage. And it
Right.
was the Road Hammers. It was our video. And I'm here going, oh, people are looking at me like, what are you doing here? Like, shouldn't you be wearing a fur coat and driving a limousine? It was just that kind of weird time in between when the band would actually started being a band, but we were already something on TV and on, and it was wild.
That's great. And at that point, I mean, you're trying to learn how to play guitar, play lead, and you're slogging around through the rougher bars in Alberta trying to figure it out. At that point, you got to pretty much put a plastic Jerry Reed on the dashboard of your car and praise to whatever God it is and hope that it all comes through. Because
100%. And it was, I've got to say those first shows for me were rough, and not only because I felt like I was in over my head so much with the music part, but playing in front of crowds like we stepped into there was no proving grounds. Like the band from note one was playing to thousands of people. Our first tour, we went across Canada, was sold out. Like there was, all of the clubs were sold out. So that next summer of 2006, we played, like I remember playing Dauphin Country Fest, and there was like 15,000 people in the stands. They said they had never seen the stands full in an afternoon show ever before. And that was us. We walked out there and it's like, I was horrified, just like, I didn't know what to do, man. Yeah.
I think it's great. My favorite road hammer memory is, and how many times have I messaged you and said, I want to be a road hammer,
Yeah.
because I see you guys doing the videos and I see Giver and I see, Hillbilly Disco and then Mud and all of the stuff that goes along with it in your live shows and all of the smoke shooting out of the smokestack microphones and this and that, the other thing. But I remember, in June of 2015, I was down visiting Plume in Nashville, and we're walking down Broadway. He parked at the other end. We sat in there and had a beer, met, and then as we decided we're going to walk down. We were walking down Broadway. We walked past Tootsie's. We walked past the stage. We walked past the Lucky Bastard and all of the stuff, and come down around the corner from where the Bridgestone Arena is. And then there's, I don't know, is it a hotel or at the Hall of Fame or something? Hall of Fame Park.
Yeah.
And we come walking around there, and we come walking into the park, and I'm starting to hear this music. I think of that as we get closer. This kind of sounds familiar to me. So we walk around, and there's you and Jason and Chris on the stage, and I just turn around and look. I'm standing there. I'm grooving away to the Road Hammers. All of a sudden, hey, it's Terry Evans. And Clayton Bellamy yells at me from the stage on the PA. And I'm looking around like, what the hell? It's so that was kind of weird. Then we went backstage and drank some of your rider, and that was fun.
That was great. And that whole trajectory, took us back to Nashville, which was pretty awesome. Because I've been going to Nashville since I was 16 years old. My dad took me there for the first time, and I fell in love with the place and always wanted to be part of the DNA of that town and of that scene, of the music scene there. And, so after living there and kind of going back defeated and thinking I was going to quit music, then joining the Road Hammers and just having it explode like it did, it got the attention of some major labels in Nashville, and we started going back and showcasing, and eventually signed a year after the first record came out. We signed with Sony Montage Records, and ended up moving back to Nashville. So I in my own, way, I felt like, I got back at the man, because I couldn't get a foot in the door, and I left Nashville, and I came back not only with a band with a hit record, but we had a record deal already, and we moved back to Nashville and started touring, and the TV show got picked up in Nashville and was playing on country music television on prime time. We had billboards with our faces on it, and it was crazy. It was a crazy time when you could walk. We were walking downtown and people were going, "Hey, it's the guys from the Road Hammers," or looking around like, what is happening right now? But it was pretty wild.
And then you come back home, with all of the Nashville stuff, you come back home to Bonnyville, and then hey, Clayton, and it's there's that kid that was on the tractor, there's that kid that helps out with harvest time and all of this stuff. It's funny how you always come back home, right? And it keeps you grounded.
100%. And it did, because it stuff got really crazy for a few years. It was insane where I was, when we signed our deal in Nashville, our feet didn't really touch the ground. We were on tour consecutively for almost 3 years, where we didn't stop. We went and went and went and played. We would do radio, in 3 or 4 different cities, and then play a show, and then do radio, and then play a show. We were just promoting singles nonstop and trying to make, trying to get it to pop in America like it did in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Do you find with the Hammers that there's sort of, I guess, identifiable roles that each of you play, Chris and Jason and yourself? And I was going to ask, is Corbett pretty much like, I know you have kind of a revolving drummer situation at times in the past, haven't you?
We did for a while, while the original member and first tenure of the band was Corbett Fraz, and he came in right at the beginning when they hired me. They were like, hey, we need to find a drummer, and I'm like, I got the guy. And Corbett was he was one of the key guys in helping us arrange, build what the show is of the Road Hammers, and adding that kind of, that it factor. I think we all had it, and it glued us together. There was a certain attitude and a certain vibe of the band that no one had really seen before. A bunch of guys with tattoos and earrings and playing country rock and roll, who were not into what was kind of going on at the time. Nobody was doing that. And Corbett, when we lost our deal with Sony, that I think everyone was just kind of so burned out, and that was kind of when Corbett he stepped down from the chair, playing drums. I believe that was 2010, and then we had for a while a rotating door of guys until we finally settled with Steve Broadhurst, and Steve's been with us for a long time now.
And then you have you look at the stage. You're on the left, Chris is on the right, Jason's in the center. There's Jason's kind of that country sort of anchor. Chris kind of looks like an accountant, and you're the rock. You're the rock and roll guy, right? So it's just the hodgepodge, a mix of everything that ends up coming out with that sound, that hammer sound that everybody digs. It's the perfect amount of rock and roll and the perfect amount of country to appease both fans of both genres.
I think it is. We really, and you're exactly it. Chris is the blues man. Jay has, he's just rooted in classic country, and that's just where he loves, that's his happy place. And for me, I've always been in that kind of blues rock, Southern rock kind of vibe. My favorite bands have been like the Steve Earles and the Black Crows and the Humble Pies and things like that. So I've always loved that kind of guitar riff rock, Leonard Skinner or Blackberry Smoke for a newer band reference. So when bringing all of that stuff together, it made this thing that was so unique, and it just has continued to go.
We'll be right back. This podcast, reluctantly, brought to you by Just for Feet. Just for Feet, just around the corner from the Sally Ann. No pants, no hats, no jackets. None of that stuff's for feet. Just for Feet. Don't come to us looking for gloves.
Reluctantly.
Road Hammers is one thing, and it continues. I mean, it's basically... there's a schedule you probably make up at some point that gets added to or detracted from time to time. Maybe there's a lengthier tour and that sort of thing. You guys have a huge following too down in Australia, don't you?
We do, yeah. And that's been just growing every year. We go down there and do a run of shows. So we've been, man, this band has taken us all over to China. It's taken us to Spain and France and the UK, all over the world. It's been pretty wild.
Isn't it amazing how music can? I mean, you're not living in a mansion or like it's not like a Florida beachfront property or anything like that. But when you're doing what you love, there you don't work a day in your life, and then being able to see the world through your music is pretty remarkable, isn't it?
It's been incredible, and to be able to, I realize that, and I think that's one thing too that keeps me grounded is that I kind of live in that 1% of artists who actually get to do what they love for a living, and that's also what um, drives me, because there was a point in time when the Roadhammers we broke up, in that after the album in 2010, when all of that, we lost our drummer and everybody, we just kind of, we got a friends break, like a Ross and Rachel break. We didn't officially say, hey, the band's broke up, but we just stopped talking to each other. And we're just like, we're not going to do this for a while. We were so incredibly burnt out from all of the work we'd been doing. And then to see it kind of fall apart and not go anywhere, we took about 4 years off, and I did a couple of, solo albums that didn't get received very well at all, that didn't do anything. And I again was kind of sliding back into this, how do I make a living? And I ended up, getting a job from a friend of mine working in the oil field in Fort Mac, grinding pipe. So it went from like my face on a billboard in Nashville, Tennessee, with my own TV show and a red hot band, to right to laying in the mud in grinding pipe and being a welder's helper for almost a year. And it was a really hard, humbling experience, because at that point I think I had my head pretty well planted up my ass in some situations. I thought I was something sometimes, but it was a real eye opener for me, that how quickly the the ladder can switch directions, and you can go back to not doing music at all. So it was tough for a little while there.
You can learn from the bad and you can learn from the good. And a lot of times you learn more from the bad or from the harder experiences. And it makes you appreciate what you have the next time you roll through on an opportunity. And, you talk about doing a couple of solo albums that weren't received well. But you didn't stop. You had to make a pit stop of grinding pipe, sure, but then something else comes to fruition. Obviously the Roadhammers are still hammering it out, and then you've kept yourself busy through your passion with other projects. You've got the congregation, which started up in when did you started the congregation in 19?
Yeah, in 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah, that year, obviously it did a lot for me. It was humbling, but it, like you said, it led to other doors. I never stopped. I was still writing songs literally across the pipe. I had a little notepad in my pocket, and I remember just writing stuff all the time. It was good fuel for creativity, that's for sure. And I ended up getting a job at a radio station in Edmonton to do the drive home show. So that took me out of the oil field, which I was, not good at. It was not my forte. But no, I was grateful for the job, but I was horrible at it. But and that took me down the road to continuing music. I did 3 years at the radio station there on the drive home show in Edmonton, and then I ended up getting a call from Jason out of the blue saying, "Hey, you want to put the band back together?" And that led to our 2015 album Wheels, which was a platinum record for us with a song called Mud. So that kind of going away almost, it's like when those big bands break up and, if you never go away, how do we miss you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when the band came back, it was like we were bigger than ever. And I think those lessons that I had learned along the way kind of galvanized me in a mode of I'm not going to let my foot off the gas again, or stop appreciating where I'm at and what I get to do. Cause I think we were working so hard before that you start sometimes stop appreciating it because the grind is so hard that it's just like, oh, I got to play another gig. It's like, well, you get to play another gig.
That's a great way of putting it. My wife and I were discussing the ways of speaking and how it dictates what the opportunity is rather than the burden is.
100%. And I tell my kids all the time, one of my favorite quotes from the Bible is life and death is in the tongue. And it's so true. What you speak becomes your reality. And when I kind of changed that in my head, when the band came back together, it was like, yeah, man, this is such a blessing. And and from there, it has not really stopped rolling. Once the train got back on the tracks, man, we didn't take our foot off the gas.
So you're doing 2005 to 2010, then the 5-year sabbatical sort of break. Then Jason calls you up in 2015 and says, we're going to, Jake Elwood, we're getting the band back together. How much for the little girl? So you get back together and, obviously it's, you learn from what happened in the first 5 years so that you don't burn yourselves out again. And then there's going to be time where you are away from each other, then you're working together. You're away from each other, you're working together. And that gives you the opportunity. You mentioned a phrase from the Bible. And it makes me wonder, are you a spiritual guy? You start up the project in 2019 called The Congregation. Is that a spiritual sort of journey that you're on, that you find other sort of, stuff that will spawn stuff away that might not fit the road hammers?
Yeah, I think that was definitely an outlet. And, but I've always been a spiritual guy, and I got baptized when I lived in Nashville, actually. It was something that, set me on a journey of always kind of seeking God, and no matter what kind of predicament I was in, I think that's always been something for me that's important, and that's fueled my music and my my outlook on life, in lots of different ways. And the congregation, ended up being from the church, that whole church idea, but I wanted it to be a rock and roll church. And the idea of the congregation was more of, can I get in and write like real rock and roll music? Because that's what I wanted to do as an artist. I was trying to change things up on my solo career side of things, apart from the road hammers, and really see, challenge myself to write something completely different.
You ever said to yourself, what would Jesus do?
All the time, and I always come up short.
WWJD.
Yeah, you know what? That's the one thing. It's like there's the goal. You're not going to hit it, but at least you got something to shoot for. But that band really, it gave me a lot of things as far as changing the way I write songs and do approach music, which was really great for me creatively. I ended up having a decent hit out of our second record with that with that project, I should say, and spawned some getting American cuts with some other rock and roll bands, and writing for some serious heavy rock artists, which was really cool. That opportunity never would have came had I not dove headfirst into just trying to reinvent myself.
You talk about the songwriting that spawned from the congregation stuff with the heavier stuff, and the list that you have with some of them that are more in the country genre. Dan Davidson, Haley Jensen. Is she from Australia?
She is, yeah.
Yeah. You have the Tim Hicks stuff. I Miss Tom Petty. You co-wrote that with him, did you not?
Yeah, that was Tim's latest single. Yeah.
Yeah. You've done stuff with Jason Blame, with Mike Plume, with all kinds of. You can't swing a dead cat in a record store without hitting something that Clayton Bellamy has either produced or co-written or had something to do with. Isn't that right?
Well, thank you. It's been pretty great. That was a lot of through the pandemic. That's all I did. I just hunkered down and wrote songs. But I've had the the opportunity to, when you're traveling around too, you get to meet so many artists. And I've always been that guy going, hey, let's write a song. And I've been, able to record with some of my heroes, like, Gordy Johnson from Big Sugar, and write with Ian Thornley from Big Wreck, and these, the Standstills, another great Canadian rock band, the Trues. So it's been great to be able to write with all of that kind of genre of folks, and then be able to turn around and go, you take from both sides. And I think creatively, it's what makes me be able to come up with different ideas, or at least different ways of looking at country music when you're writing with, a Jason Blaine or Chad Brownlee, or whoever the artist is, or the Roadhammers for that matter, to be able to have a different perspective.
And then your influences come back around full circle almost, because it's obvious there's some Tom Petty influence, and you've got the legendary life of Tom Petty that you've been touring across and been quite successful with across Canada. And I mean, it's a show, and I can't wait to see it myself. We've got one coming up at the end of November here in Edmonton. I'm very excited to go and catch it. And you end up, being in a crowd of people, and obviously they're expecting the Tom Petty material, because that's what you're doing. It's the legendary life of Tom Petty. You're paying homage to one of the greatest artists of our generation, and it's going real well for you.
Yeah, that's been really fun. Again, one of those things that you never know how the river is going to bend. And I got an opportunity to, from some friends of mine, to do this thing called The Legendary Life of Tom Petty, and just go out and play some shows as an established artist representing somebody who I admire. So it's not me pretending to be Tom. We don't do any of that. In fact, I'm doing my interpretation of the music, and I get to dig into all of these live shows and come up with ways we're going to create a concert, and interspersed with that is just stories from Tom's life and his journey, kind of thing. So we have all kinds of video and pictures playing in the background as we're rocking out to Tom Petty. And then in the middle, I play a couple of songs that I wrote that may have been an influence down the line by Tom, and it makes for a really great night of music.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. The hour has flown by.
Man, it sure has.
I got a piece of paper pinned to my wall here with probably 2 more shows worth of questions. And I still, the first thing I'm going to do when we're done, John William Bellamy.
Hey, we haven't talked about aliens or conspiracy theories yet. And I got so much material for you.
Were you ever abducted and then you got onto the spaceship and you looked over and said, hey, it's Sammy Hagar?
Yeah.
No, you should read Sammy Hagar's biography, man. He'll tell you all. It's something else. He swears to God that he has been abducted.
I can't wait. I keep waiting. I go out on my deck every night and look up there and go, I'm ready. Like, can we go now, please? Like, anytime. Clock's ticking.
Clayton Bellamy, so great to see you. We got to do this again, because we got to talk about your philanthropy and the Clayton Bellamy Foundation for the Arts. Clayton Bellamy Foundation for the Arts.org.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we raise money to send kids a secondary education in the arts, and we're building a theater right now in my hometown of Bonnyville. It's been the best thing I've ever done with music. Is to be able to have that opportunity to share it in a way where we're helping people.
We're going to leave it at that, and we'll talk more about that next time I have you on. It's been a real treat. I appreciate you taking the time, man.
My pleasure, amigo. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, love you, man. Take care.
Later.
Reluctantly.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the Clayton Bellamy Foundation for the Arts, which supports education and community-based programs in the province of Alberta by providing financial support to arts programs in need and by advocating the benefits and importance of arts education.
Reluctantly.